What's going on, guys? It's your average consumer, and we need to talk about the iPhone XR. I've been using this thing for the last week, and honestly, I think it's gonna be the most compelling iPhone for a lot of people this year. But let's talk about it, all of the good and the bad. For those unaware, the iPhone XR was announced alongside its more premium brother and sister, the iPhone XS and XS Max. And I personally was pretty happy to see Apple offer an option that was essentially the same phone with just less premium hardware, but with a $250 cheaper price tag. Now, I say essentially, but there are some pretty important to know compromises. Overall, you're getting all that the iPhone XS has to offer, like Face ID, the powerful A12 Bionic chip, louder speakers, wireless charging, dual SIM capabilities, iOS 12, and the updated wide-angle camera sensor. But you are spending $250 less. And that brings me to my first good, the price. Now, I am by no means saying $750 is cheap, but when you compare to $1,000, it's a pretty good value, all things considered. So think about it, with that $250, you can get a dope case, a screen protector, a fast charger, which should absolutely be in the box, but you can get all that and have money left over. I mean, come on. Now, what makes Apple able to offer it at that price tag is the fact that it only has one camera lens in the back, an aluminum casing instead of stainless steel, an LCD display instead of OLED. So that brings me to my first bad, and that's the screen. And you guys know me, I am not that guy that goes nuts about specs, so when I first held the iPhone XR, I knew it had a lower res screen. You could barely tell, and I honestly wasn't bothered by it. You only really notice a difference if you're comparing it side by side with the XS and you're looking for it. And it's still plenty bright and vibrant, but the reason why I'm listing it under the bad is because that lower resolution and the viewing angles do kind of hurt the experience. When sharing the screen with another person or even watching content at a certain angle other than directly in front of you, you do get a dimmer experience. The screen does look a bit less bright off center, but this is only impacting you if you're sharing your screen or if you're coming directly from an OLED already. If you're coming from the 8 or earlier, you're already used to this kind of screen behavior. But honestly, guys, this is not a deal breaker for anyone. It shouldn't be, but it might be something to take note of if you're trying to decide between the XR or maybe the XS or XS Max. But talking about the display brings me to my next good, the size. At 6.1 inches, the XR is almost smack dab in the middle of the 5.8 inch XS and the 6.5 inch XS Max. And it really feels like the right size, guys. It's been really nice to me to have that big display without an oversized body. And for those folks out there who have been using the plus size versions of the iPhones, you can get something like this and it'll feel just right. From my personal experience, the XS Max took me a little bit longer to get used to than normal, but the XR immediately felt like the perfect size. It felt great in the hand, and using various gestures is a breeze, and it's definitely a big enough screen for constant consumption, except for those bezels, which brings me to my next bad. The bezels kinda suck. And it's almost unfair because I'm coming from a 10 and a XS Max, so those bezels were immediately noticeable to me. But if you're coming from the 8 or earlier, the design is gonna be a vast improvement. But if you compare it to something like the XS, it's quite a difference. So if you are upgrading and you truly want that bezel-less edge-to-edge experience, the XS is the better bet. You just gotta think about, is it worth shelling out the extra $250 for? Now, even though we got a lower res display, that does mean better battery life. The battery life that we're seeing with the XR is probably better than any battery life that we've seen with an iPhone yet. This battery will easily last throughout the entire day. It did for me, and that's with me gaming, web browsing, being on social media, all the stuff that you'd expect, and it kind of handled that with no problem. I was honestly hoping for this kind of battery life with the XS Max, but when it comes to battery life, the XR is the winner. Not to mention, because of that glass back, it has wireless charging, and you can also fast charge this thing, so battery life, absolutely not an issue with this phone. But aside from a lower res display, the body is also what helped to keep the cost down. Like I mentioned earlier, you have an aluminum body instead of stainless steel, and while some may view this as a negative thing, I actually think it's a positive for two reasons. One, you get better durability in the sense of not having to worry about scratches with the stainless steel, and you also get a ton of color options. The XR comes in all these really fun colors, which I think will appeal to both a younger and older consumer base. So I think this is going to be a really popular choice, even though it does feel a little bit less premium than the XS or XS Max. And that's not to say that this phone doesn't feel premium though, because it still has that nice glass back, which also gives it some nice heft. But we do have to talk about one more compromise here, which is probably my biggest one, and that's the camera. Because we only have the wide angle lens here, which really does work well, we only have access to software-based portrait mode. And while it does work well, it is only limited to working with people, so that means no portrait mode photos of your pets or any objects. So if you're someone that relies on portrait mode, or you really want to upgrade from an older phone so you have access to that feature, this is probably not the phone for you. But honestly, the camera's a compromise only if you care about portrait mode and some of those portrait lighting effects, which honestly applies to a very small group of people. I did a quick poll among my tech enthusiast audience on Twitter, and 40% of the people who have portrait mode don't even use it. And this was kind of surprising because I use it all the time. Portrait mode aside, as a regular camera, it works well and takes beautiful sharp photos, same as the XS. And another thing that might be considered bad is that you're not getting 3D touch, you're getting haptic touch. So now you're gonna be long pressing on something like the flashlight or the camera app. But for me, I actually really like 3D touch when I was using something like Google Maps. So if I wanted directions to home, I wouldn't have to jump into the app to do that. Can't really do that here, so that's a little bit unfortunate and something that I had to get used to while using this. But overall, guys, I really do feel like Apple did something great here. I truly believe this phone was made for someone who isn't a crazy tech enthusiast, but still wants an iPhone and all the iPhone 10 features like Face ID, access to animojis, and all that kind of stuff with the same body. Who doesn't care that this phone has an LCD screen versus OLED or aluminum casing versus stainless steel? This is really made for the average consumer. I just feel like this phone is for people who want the features of an iPhone 10, but don't want to pay $1,000 to get it. Interestingly enough, there's not a ton of buzz around this phone, but I feel like this is what everyone's going to be picking up around Christmas because they don't want to shell out $1,000 for a phone. And for those interested, the XR comes in at $750 for a 64 gig option, and there's a max capacity version of 256 gigs that goes for $899, which is still $100 cheaper than the base model XS. But you guys let me know what you think of the XR. Is it an option for you? Let me know with a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be the cool guy or girl that gives this video a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, it's your average consumer. Peace.